They're like dumb guys here.
Wait.
Give him back his gun for that.
Aji?
You want to trade?
Bisa taruh muka ang tapal nanti nih.
Once we hit the Philippines, like there were real fears. There's a reason to be afraid. But you can mitigate these fears by doing certain things. And that's, I think, what we learned is that you're gonna always have fears and they should be valid and you should respect them, but don't let it stop you from doing what you wanna do and going where you wanna go. We're in Port Moresby and we're actually just hiding on our boat right now.
Looting happened in Port Moresby.
Angry local police and national soldiers have stormed Papua New Guinea's parliament building.
But it's a bit interesting because there's police boats right here and we're meeting good police in the grocery store who are telling us, you know, it's time to go, but you know, you'll be fine to get there. But we just don't know. We don't know what's gonna happen.
There's pockets of violence in every country, whether it's Canada, United States, Europe, but you don't paint the whole area saying it's all violent. And that's exactly what Papua New Guinea is.
There are a lot of moments that probably would have been scary to us along the way again, but because we'd already done it before, they were no longer so scary.
I'm Ben, that's Ashley. Together, we did the unimaginable. We sold everything and then set off on a mission to sail around the world.
Civilization. See you later.
28 countries later and over 25,000 nautical miles, we are only halfway around the world.
I have no idea what's gonna happen.
Subscribe to follow the adventure as we finish this lap.
So we're gonna do something a little different today. We get a lot of comments like, isn't it scary sailing out there or sailing around the world? Or we get questions like, what's the biggest storm you've ever been in? And this totally plays into everyone's fears. So today we're gonna talk to you about our top scariest moments that we've had sailing around the world.
Keep in mind, we're only halfway around the world. So our boat is currently in Thailand. It kind of got stuck there during COVID. We had a couple of babies. And in 2022, in a matter of weeks, we're gonna set off on the second half of our circumnavigation. It's gonna present its own challenges. We have 2 more kids. We got the Indian Ocean to cross. We either go around the bottom of Africa or through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean. So there's a lot more moments and times coming up that will be scary.
But until then, let's get into our scariest moments so far.
The first time we actually experienced real weather, real wind, I guess the first storm, was sailing down to Colombia, Cartagena. There's an area in the Gulf of Mexico which gets really strong winds in kind of November, December.
And it was nerve-wracking leading up to it because it has this like stigma around it. It's like one of the top worst passages possibly that you can do.
We were coasting down these waves. You'd accelerate down these waves and the boat would start surfing down the wave. And then you hit the trough and you'd slow down and then you'd wait for the next wave to catch up and pitch you down the next one. Of course, at night it increased in wind and the waves also seemed bigger. Were they actually bigger? I don't know.
They were like breaking. They were like breaking behind us. It was intense.
This is what it looks like now. Check this out. We have the tiniest handkerchief of a sail out. Mainsail packed away in the sail bag, which adds probably an extra knot. And we're doing 6 knots. Surfing down waves, I've seen up to 10. Basically no sail up. Pretty amazing tonight. And the waves are massive.
It was really hard to sleep because you're being like, the noises the boat makes when you're going that fast down waves are intense.
It starts vibrating and humming. Like
yeah. We had like no sail up, but it was awesome. Like really, I don't know. I think it was like a bit scary. It was almost scarier leading up to it, and then once you're in it, it was like you just kind of went with it. And luckily, it built slowly over the passage. Like by the time we were hitting those 35 knots sustained, it was like we'd already had, you know, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, 25 to 30, and then it hit the end, and then we arrived in Colombia.
Yeah, so from Colombia, we made our way down to Panama. Beautiful cruising grounds. There's the San Blas Islands. Local Kuna Indians live there, and you trade what's called molas, which are like hand sewn things for
Money usually.
money, U.S. dollars. The U.S. dollar is very popular all around the world. And we made our way to Panama. Panama not only has the Panama Canal, which we had to go through, but also has a lot of parts and food, because the next stretch of water is the Pacific Ocean. And to cross the Pacific Ocean, you need a lot of food, water, and beer.
And Panama's interesting because it's inexpensive to provision there. So it's a fantastic place to kind of stock up on stuff that you'll know will be very expensive as you hit the Marquesas, the Tuamotus, before you arrive in Tahiti, where you can replenish things. But, you know, it's still expensive, but not obscene. I think the scariest thing about Panama was driving there. And what happened?
We were driving along in this rental, and they have these huge ass median dividers, and they're not dividing counter traffic, they're dividing traffic going the same way. I managed to switch lanes just as these big ass dividers were starting. So I was straddling these dividers, the bottom of the car is getting hit by these huge concrete blocks, and I'm like, I gotta get off, like I'm gonna ruin this car. So I try to get over to one lane or the other, and the car just kind of bounces. Eventually I managed to get off, but at this point we were on top of a bridge, and the car managed to pitch itself off of these dividers and into the guardrail on the bridge, and it literally peeled open the side of that car on one side. Luckily no one was hurt, and
We're laughing about it now.
no one was hurt, but as we blocked traffic on that bridge, we saw, I think, 3, maybe 4 other cars do the exact same thing, where they just hit the dividers and crash and pop tires.
So I think the biggest fear when we were doing that was like, one, we're in Panama City and it's dangerous where we are, and people are telling us to get back in the car and lock the doors.
Yeah.
And 2, oh my gosh, we've just crashed a car in Panama, and crashing a car is scary, and yeah, the whole thing was a scary thing. Driving there was scary.
I'd call that a little whoops. What would you call that?
Big whoops. 2 flat tires, car destroyed. We haven't even had it 24 hours.
Days like today, were you glad you have a rental?
No, it's glad you have insurance.
So next we crossed the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean is the largest distance we have to cross in the whole circumnavigation. It was 19 days at sea, and you may think that's scary, but it's called the Pacific Ocean for a reason. It's very gentle. There's very few storms there during cruising season, which is a non-cyclone season, and nothing really happened. But we landed in the Marquesas on the other side.
Yeah, and the Marquesas was beautiful and stunning, and the winds there actually were kind of a little bit scary as they came down the mountains, and like I don't know, what do you call it? They're
Gusts.
Like, yeah, like it was insane gusts that were just hitting our boat in this deep, deep anchorage. It was probably the deepest we've ever anchored in, and it was insane.
Well, we made our way down to Tahiti, and we did a really cool hike there on Moria. You can explain it.
I think it's the scariest hike I've ever been on.
Yeah.
We're not mountain climbers. We love hiking, but we don't like climb mountains with gear. This was like climbing a mountain with no gear. And I had no idea it was going to be like this. We got to the top and we were walking on a spine. I swear it was the width of Ben's feet. His feet are pretty big, but not that big. And literally you're standing down there, you put your feet down on the ground and you stand up as you climb up onto that top of the mountain, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's literally a sheer drop off on either side. That was the scariest hike I've ever been on.
What was interesting though, that trail at the very top was trodden. Like, people do it all the time, I guess. So it wasn't like we were first ones up there, but it was pretty cool up there. After Moria, we continued sailing on to Huahine. It's an island surrounded by a coral reef. Like many of French Polynesian islands, they always have an outer reef. And not only there, but further down, we saw a couple wrecks. Catamarans had made a navigational mistake and ended up on these reefs.
I think after sailing as far as we had at that point, you kind of get a little bit complacent almost, and you realize seeing the wrecks made me realize how vulnerable we really are out there. Like you're so vulnerable. You can lose your home, your boat in a heartbeat.
The problem is that these reefs, they come out of nowhere and they're thousands of feet deep, and then all of a sudden it's 2 feet deep. So if you don't have the right maps, if your GPS is off, if you make a navigational mistake by a few meters when you're close to these places, you're done for. It's over.
That brought up a lot of fear in me that we really, and it's kind of like a good wake-up call to pay attention more, right? Like it's more of a realization of being vulnerable.
Yeah. So we continued on from French Poly, made our way through Tonga, down to New Zealand, back up to Fiji, and over to Vanuatu. So at this point, we'd kind of finished the South Pacific, the classical South Pacific cruising grounds, and we were heading into what's called the Western Pacific. This included places like Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, which we didn't actually get into, Papua New Guinea, and then, of course, Asia. And it got really interesting at this point. This is where the culture really started. And not that there wasn't culture before, but it's very similar, or more similar to Western culture. The things that we saw in the Western Pacific were so unique and such a step back in time in how they lived and how they subsistence lived off the land and off the sea was incredible. And we have some of the biggest memories there.
I mean, and looking back, there were some fears as we approached these places.
Welcome to Papua New Guinea. Good place to decompress after an 11-day passage from Vanuatu to here. 11 days, it's a long one. First impressions. It's one of the most beautiful places I think we've ever been to. The people are beautiful. The culture is different. Again. I'm getting to the point where I feel like new cultures can't surprise me, but the beetle nut is kind of disgusting. You want to speak to that?
When everyone has rotten teeth and their gums look like they're bleeding and their teeth are like red and yellow. Are those too big? Too big? Because I have smaller ones.
You want smaller?
I want
small one.
Small?
Yeah.
Okay. Fishing line, this is okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I read about it, and I read a few other accounts about how gnarly and disgusting the beetle nut is. It's disgusting. I don't know if their gums actually bleed. I think it makes it red. Like I think the mustard with the lime, which is just like two things really that first they take a bite of the beetle nut. They lick the mustard bean, then they dip it in the lime.
Which
powder.
is a white powder.
Yeah, like lime. Like it's not good for you.
Big one for the big ones. Okay.
And it apparently gives them a slight high. Mustard. Yeah. Mustard or lime, yeah?
Lime.
Oh. That's the mustard though.
Yeah, this is the mustard. What's the lime? Open the lime and I'll chew until you.
I'll try it. But
I'm not trying it. Let's just put that straight out there. I have no interest in trying it. The women do it here too, but nope. I do not need to do that. That is not something I need to do.
it's been a culture shock day. Anyways, tomorrow is a big day. We've had a few people come up and trade. It's very busy out here because everyone wants to trade with you. They want sugar and rice and rope and sail materials and fish hooks. And I look forward to what this next week has to bring. I think we're gonna show you some pretty cool stuff from, where are we? Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, Papua New Guinea. We weren't actually afraid until we hit Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea.
How's it going, darling?
It's windy, wavy. We're just coming into a major port where there's a massive amount of warships because there's an APEC meeting. So, should be interesting.
So to back up, we're coming from Vanuatu, a very safe country. There's not much violence. There's some petty theft, but that's about it. If you look up Papua New Guinea, and it says do not travel there. Extreme violence, riots, carjackings, rape, all those things they say are in Papua New Guinea, and they are.
There are very safe areas of Papua New Guinea in the islands, in the Louisiades, for example, where we had an amazing time. When you hit the big cities is when you really have to start watching that yourself. And also I think in the northern part in the mountains as well. So there are definitely areas of Papua New Guinea that you have to really be careful of and watch yourself. We only visited one area that was like this, and it was Port Moresby. And while we were there, some crazy stuff happened, and it was because of an APEC meeting that was there. There was like gunshots being fired right on the street in front of, we were staying at the yacht club because you stay at the yacht club because it's the safest place to stay.
What's going on?
Well, there's a police car coming out this way. I wonder what that's all. We're in Port Moresby, and we're actually just hiding on our boat right now. They finished with the APEC, but it turns out that there's been a bit of unrest after APEC.
Widespread looting happened in Port Moresby.
Angry local police and national soldiers have stormed Papua New Guinea's parliament building, shattering windows and tearing up furniture. After working to keep the peace while the capital, Port Moresby, hosted the APEC summit.
The police have actually started the unrest. So there was quite a number of police officers involved in protecting all the delegates and Canadians, Australians, Americans. Everyone's been here. The police are sort of on the bottom of the totem pole from what we understand of being paid, and they were meant to have an allowance, I think, for basically all the overtime and living here because some of them came from other places. Well, they started a protest in front of the parliament buildings earlier. And now they've moved up over the hill, down the hill, and they've of course got guns because they're police, and they, they're shooting them off and a bunch of stuff going on. But it's pretty much the yacht club's on lockdown. We're in the yacht club. The supermarket, we were out provisioning. We got oodles of groceries, and we were told we were safe when we left. And by the time we got back, we were a little less safe because they're literally right across from the yacht club, sort of getting together in a big group to do, I have no idea what.
What actually happened is we were at the mall getting groceries.
To leave, yeah.
And some guy says, as we're leaving, where are you going? Because he sees that we're white. And he says, we're to the yacht club. It's a couple blocks down. He's like, no, get in my car. I'm going to drive you there.
It wasn't safe to walk. Literally, it was like a block.
Yeah. So we get back to yacht club, unload, put everything on the boat. We just need to get fuel and then we can get out of there. But at this point, the shots were starting to be fired and riots were happening by the police themselves.
At the gate, like they were on the street on the front of the yacht club.
You start to get a little bit of hints of how serious this is when the local staff start standing against walls, and trying to get out of any kind of, spray.
Basically, we don't know which police to trust. Like Ashley said, the yacht club's on lockdown now. They closed all the gates. All the staff were staring out at the windows. And we still need to get diesel to get out of here. So that's kind of our top priority is now. It's just getting diesel so that if we need to pull out, we can pull out.
But it's a bit interesting because there's police boats right here. And we're meeting good police in the grocery store who are telling us, it's time to go, but you'll be fine to get there. But we just don't know. We don't know what's gonna happen.
But yeah, we're gonna stow our stuff and keep a low profile.
I will be fighting tooth and nail that every policeman that worked and made sure that their names are on the list, they will be paid out their allowances.
They will be paid their allowance. Get it from me. That's what is going to happen.
So we're just leaving Port Moresby. The riots have died down, the civil unrest is gone, and we're out of here.
Papua New Guinea was one of our favorite countries to visit. It is super off the beaten path. The locals are so friendly, especially in the outer islands. It is a beautiful country.
And don't let that deter you from going there by any means. Our fear is deter you from going there at any means. But do be careful in Port Moresby and do your research about what is safe and what is not.
I think the lesson here is there's pockets of violence in every country, whether it's Canada, United States, Europe, but you don't paint the whole area as with a broad brush saying it's all violent. And that's exactly what Papua New Guinea is. The outer islands on the eastern side are totally safe. The other side of Papua New Guinea, the Indonesian side, is totally safe. So you just gotta pick and choose where to go.
Absolutely. So after Papua New Guinea, we made our way north to Palau. And that was an interesting passage too. Remember the dodging the logs? Like it was like a whole new thing. And that's where we realized we were actually coming into a whole different, we're starting to venture into Southeast Asia. We're experiencing different things in the water. Like there was a lot more debris in the water, which we hadn't had before. So hitting logs and you can't see them at night. So it was like always like, it was a bit scary because some of them were bloody big.
One of the things that happens in the sailing circles is cruisers talk to each other, and you would think that all cruisers are, you know, resilient and strong and don't have fears, but the fact is there is a lot of fear in the sailing circles, and there was a lot of talk about kidnappings and Abu Sayyaf and pirates in the Philippines, and the other talk was around FADs, fish attractant devices off the Philippine coastline. These were rumored to be huge cylinders made out of metal. Some stories were that they were from World War II. I don't know if that's true. That were anchored in hundreds of meters, even thousands of meters of water, which you can't see. And they use those to, well, attract fish, but also tie up to them and fish off of them.
So we just came across our first Filipino big fishing boat. It's looks kind of like a war canoe. It has like huge outriggers on it. We're like over 200 miles offshore, and this thing is out here. And then there's little like, I don't know, bancas around it. This is insane. They're out here in the middle of nowhere. Well, I guess we are too, but still, it's cool.
It's a totally new world. We haven't come across fishing boats that look like this yet. I mean, we expected them, we've seen them in pictures, but it's really quite cool. They're huge. They're very, 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 very big outrigger style boats. It looks like a giant triangle when it's face onto you.
We'll see what tonight brings. Hopefully these guys are lit up at night. Hopefully we can spot them on the radar. But it's just afternoon, early afternoon now, so we have we'll knock off another like 50 miles before dark. And then we'll be 150 miles closer to shore, which will get interesting. All right.
Yeah, it'll be a busy night, I think.
No napping tonight.
No, Ben.
And you know what? It's true. They are there. So, I mean, you're playing a bit of roulette going, and what we were told was that, you know, you shouldn't sail unless it's a full moon so you can see these things, and, you know, there was like kind of this huge fear put into us of these fads.
We mitigated our risk by approaching the Philippine coastline during daylight so that we dropped anchor basically at night, which is not typically something we do. We want to leave as much light as possible as we approach land. But we ended up seeing some of these fads, and there were Filipino fishing boats tied up to them, and yeah, they would have done some damage if we'd hit them.
And we actually saw them the night before. They're so far offshore. Like you're like, oh geez. Because they show up on radar when a boat's attached to them, they pop up on radar. Yeah. If there's no boat attached to them, I don't think you'd see them. So it is something absolutely that is something to be cautious of, respectful of, but don't let it stop you from going there. None of those things should stop you from going there. The Philippines was one of our favorite places.
Philippines is our #1 spot, I'd say, in our whole circumnavigation. We'll be going back there on the second circumnavigation. So we didn't end up hitting any fads. We had a beautiful time in the Philippines, but the next story kind of comes when we left the Philippines. We made our way down the Mindanao coastline and into what's known as the Sulu Sea. The Sulu Sea is known to be harboring Abu Sayyaf. There's been actual sailors kidnapped by them and beheaded due to ransom demands not being met. So we were very nervous, to the point of being scared, I'd say. So we ran dark at night. All the lights were off on the boat, both inside and running lights. We had radar on.
Sailing offshore is basically just hours and hours of boredom, punctuated by moments of sheer terror. Not much goes on out here. There's a bunch of water, some birds, maybe some fish. Out here in the Pacific, there's not that many boats, the occasional tanker, maybe some illegal fishing vessels. And honestly, you don't really want to bump into anyone. It's pretty remote.
Oh yeah, what's going on?
We're just off the coast of Mindanao here, and there's a couple guys here. I think they want some food or something, so we're gonna give them a couple apples.
And they're in this tiny little boat. It's kind of crazy, man. It's freaky looking.
Kind of awesome. It's pretty rough right now.
It's really rough out.
You give them the wrist crackers that are sailed here?
Yeah. It's a huge current going down the coast of Mindanao, and these guys are coming up beside us. There's a mothership way, you can't see it, way off there. It's a tiny little boat. They're happy, they're waving, they're fishermen. We're gonna go pass them some Ritz crackers, some apples, and maybe some water. I don't know. Poor guys. Rough out here.
I don't know that we want fish, but we'll throw them a couple of cans of tuna too. I should have probably given them more, man. I guess they're going back to the mothership.
That is absolutely nuts. There's a story of another cruiser that gave these guys something, not these guys, different guys, and then they swarmed by so many more.
Uh-oh.
We'll see if more come. Crazy little boat though. Yeah, Southern Philippines has different fishing boats. Those are like, we call them the slipper boats. They're cool.
And it turns out we ended up having some really wonderful interactions with some fishermen heading down the Philippine coastline.
They were not pirates.
No.
They were fishermen.
We gotta give them more. They came back and they're giving us a fish. I'm gonna give them duck confit.
Should we give them some rice too?
Look at all this. Skip shot.
Oh, dinner!
If I don't catch them, the locals will give them to me. No pirates, just friendly fishermen wanting to trade food for fish.
Once we hit the Philippines, we were having to, like, there were real fears. There's a reason to be afraid. But you can mitigate these fears by doing certain things. And that's, I think, what we learned, is that you're gonna always have fears, and they should be valid and you should respect them, but don't let it stop you from doing what you want to do and going where you want to go, as long as you kind of take the approach that you mitigate these things, right?
So our mitigation tactic for the Philippines was to enter the Philippines from the east, go all the way across to the west to El Nido, the place we want to see, and then instead of heading straight south to Indonesia, we headed back east and then south to avoid the hottest spot for the Abu Sayyaf, and it worked out beautifully. We didn't have any close calls. There was maybe one incident where I think it was a huge fishing freighter that came at us, charged us in the middle of the night, but we didn't have our running lights on. As soon as we turned them on, he swerved and avoided us. So he's probably just checking us out, maybe playing with us a little bit, telling us to turn our lights on, and that's about it.
And then we made it to Indonesia, which was a whole new world again. And it was beautiful there. We cruised through Raja Ampat area to check in at Ambon, and we stopped at some beautiful areas along the way because we didn't want to be sailing at night there.
Took some time to get to the check-in.
And one of the stops that we did just before we hit Ambon, we couldn't go through this little passage at night, otherwise we probably would have kept going to check in. There was no anchorage listed anywhere. It was like, I don't think any sailboats anchor in that area normally. And
it got a little hairy for a second there.
Well, it was definitely a new experience for a nighttime thing. So it's like we're quite offshore. There's a village way off in the corner, and we're anchored off these little uninhabited islands. And we just thought, okay, this is great. We're alone for the night, and we didn't think twice about it. But it's a pretty shallow area that we were anchored in.
So we dropped anchor just before dark and decided to, make some dinner and go about our nightly routine. All of a sudden, all these bankas. Bankas are just long fiberglass boats, open, come out kind of near us and start fishing, but not really fishing. It gets darker and darker, and then once it's completely dark, they come up to our boat.
Hello. We got a lot of fishermen also. I'm not sure what's going on. Where's the fish? You have fish? No fish?
Fish compressor.
With compressor?
Yes.
Okay.
Dalam.
I asked them what they're doing. They're saying they're fishing. I'm like, where's the fish? I don't see any fish. And they say, compressor, compressor. I'm like, okay, so you're gonna do, you know, go down with the snuba basically. So I didn't really get it. And we were very nervous. I mean, Ashley's wearing a negligee.
I was not wearing a negligee.
Whatever, some cover up. And there's 11 dudes.
Yeah.
They're just coming to check out the boat. I don't think they get, no one stops here normally.
Yeah, I don't think many people stop here.
Yeah.
Ah, a lot of boats, 3 boats. Like 11 guys here.
They try to climb on our boat because I think they literally just want to get selfies. I tell them, no, get off the boat. That's not okay. You can't come onto my property. So they dangle off the back step for a while.
Because
and
we were scared.
We're trying to communicate, and they can't speak English. We can't speak Bahasa, which is what their language is.
No English?
Yeah, no English.
What language do you speak?
Wait, no.
You speak Islama, Indonesian?
Indonesian.
Indonesian. Okay.
Yeah, no Indonesian.
No Indonesian.
Oh, no Indonesian.
We can only make signals.
Good.
Sailboat. We sail. It's like wind? Do you do bombs? Dynamite?
No. Panah aja, Sir. Kalau panah.
We do spearfishing.
A knife.
Yeah, with the compressor, see? Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Oh.
Oh, it's one of those guns. Can I see? Yeah. Yeah, and this is awesome. Oh, okay. They make these guns here that are single action. They're very, very neat. Do you ever sell this? I buy it. No?
He needs it for fishing.
Mau jual, mau ambil.
Trade.
Trade. You want to trade?
No.
Very nice.
Ikan.
Yeah. Ben, he wants one.
I want one.
Yeah.
You want to trade? Trade? I give you something and you give me a gun? No? Ah, cookies. There's like 2 per package. For you.
Enak.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We start to trade items. So we give them cookies. We give them what's called costumes. They're like clothing. We give them, what else do we give them? Oh, some flippers and stuff.
What's your name?
Oh, my name is Usman. My name is Usman.
Usman. I'm Ben.
Ben,
yeah. And these are your friends?
Australia.
No, Canada.
Canada.
Yeah.
Jauh.
Yeah, cold.
Canada. Mister.
Yes.
Costume. 2.
Look at you. One costume, but I have more t-shirts. T-shirts?
Yes.
T-shirts?
Yes.
Okay, wait. Let me.
Yes.
What has just happened, Ash?
3 boatloads of guys came up, and we didn't know what they want. We were a little nervous, actually.
We're just making dinner. It's dark out now.
Probably like 7.
We got the quarantine flag up, so we're just waiting to do the clearing. And they just want to trade. Check this out. Check out what I got.
He's been wanting one of these for a long time.
So I traded my mother-in-law's flippers, like her fins, for a single action spear gun. These are really cool. I first saw these in Palau.
It was, I think, one of the most wonderful experiences we've ever had interacting with locals, which was set up as this really tense moment at the beginning and then turned into this beautiful way of communicating through trade, but not being able to communicate verbally.
And they were pretty stoked on things that they got, and we were super stoked. And then they came back later and offered us fish. But
Yeah.
it was really one of the most it turned out to be one of the most interesting experiences we've had. And it started off definitely a little bit like nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Nerve-wracking.
One of our favorite and biggest memories of the whole circumnavigation, I'd say, so far.
Yeah.
He wants to go to sleep. There you go. Just wiggle him. And with that, we conclude our scariest moments of sailing around the world so far. Again, we're only halfway, so it's going to get pretty interesting on the second half of circumnavigation.
We got 2 kids now, and I think there's going to be different fears that kind of go along with sailing. It's like kids falling overboard and like big seas and what to do with them when there's huge seas. So there's a lot. It's like, again, it's first, right? It's that first time you hit those giant seas. It's that first time you hit that bottom. It's the first time you hit that rock. It's the first time you encounter that new culture. It's the first time you're cruising in an area where there's fads. So firsts are scary, and I think that's what we're kind of concluding from this. It's like, don't be afraid to go out there, because as soon as that first one's over, it's not easy, but your fears go away. Your sort of irrational fears go away. If we'd been so afraid that we'd never left that dock, we wouldn't be here today.
I think that's a great way to summarize it. There's a cost to every decision, whether you go or you don't go. If you go, you're gonna have possibilities of hitting a reef, possibility of getting robbed. If you don't go, there's other consequences, such as not living the life you want to live. And that's something that I don't think we will ever entertain, because life is really short.
So we mitigate our fears. Pound to that. And sometimes I'm the one who's terrified, sometimes Ben's the one who's terrified.
Just naming your fear is something that really helps, because it puts it on the table and then you can talk about it. And finally, once you overcome each of these fears, overcome each of these steps along the way, you gain confidence in the ability of yourself, the ability of your crew and your boat. And with that, you can aim for bigger horizons, further horizons, and do it with confidence.
You're still gonna have scary moments.
Yes.
Like hitting the rock.
Like your wife yelling at you. Scary.
Like sailing off with 202.
Yeah. Behind the scenes, we're packing, we're moving out of our apartment that we rented, and we're ordering parts for our boat that's in Thailand. We'll be back in January. If you want to follow along behind the scenes, you can do that on Patreon. Otherwise, we're gonna try and come up with a few more episodes before we get back to our boat, and hope you enjoy.
Thanks for watching, thanks for following along, and we'll see you in Thailand so soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.